tawba is an absolute obligation. You've got to turn back to Allah from every wrongdoing that you do. But also don't despair. And Allah has the power to forgive all sins, although He says that He does not forgive shirk. So this is again the definition of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Who are the people who follow the way of the Prophet, the Sunnah of the Prophet, and who also constitute in our community the big community. This is where we stand. We don't say things like this. We don't say like that. Okay, Allah forgives any sin that He wills. That's possible for Him. And He is just. And He creates a fire. And most people will go to the fire. That's the fact. And you can say even most people were created for the fire. And we can talk about why that is. Although in theology, we don't usually go into much depth on that. You know, but this is a very important thing, that the fire has meaning. It is not just an ethical and a moral proposition. Okay, it is a metaphysical proposition. But nevertheless, you know, we're really careful about what we say. Then he says, number 13, because he just told you that tawbah is an obligation, and he is a faqih. So he's going to say, what do you have to do tawbah? وَشَرْطُهَا مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ أَنْ يُقْلِعَ مِنْ فَوْرِهِ وَالْعَزْمُ أَلَّا يَرْجِعَ وَشَرْطُهَا مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ أَنْ يُقْلِعَ مِنْ فَوْرِهِ وَالْعَزْمُ أَلَّا يَرْجِعَ. So he says, and its preconditions, this is the lawyer speaking, right, are one, to cease doing the act at once. So you have to do tawbah and you can't put it off. This is a precondition of tawbah. Can't say that, well, I'll wait till Ramadan. Now you're in Ramadan, so be sure that you do your tawbah. But you can't say that, just like, you know, young people always get into trouble, so do old people. But you have young people. I know people in Chicago, for example, who are doing things they're Muslims they should never be doing. And you probably know people like that too. You know, maybe you don't, but I do. And if you tell them, they say, well, you know, give us a few years. Yeah, you're not going to die in a car accident before that? You know, we had a young man who was a very good young man in Chicago who was driving a motor scooter, and he got off of Lakeshore Drive and he went into a very, you know, exit that everybody knows, and he hit a bump, fell off the scooter, hit his head, and was dead. Just like that. And he was only like 18 years old. So you know where you'll be tomorrow? I don't. And young people, you know, we'll wait till we get older. Well, you may not get older. And then also, when you get older, you may not be able to do tawbah, because every time that you violate the law, you lose something of your rational soul that can never be replaced again. That's why the pure life is also the beautiful life. It is the life of great, great good. So we don't play around with this. The preconditions of tawbah is, first of all, that we cease doing the act at once. Yes? Imam al-Ghazali talks about that in the Marvels of the Heart. And Imam al-Ghazali makes that point. Never take any wrong action lightly. It is true that good deeds obliterate bad deeds. So if you sully the mirror of the heart, and we sully it by doing bad deeds, we can clean it, we can polish it. But it will, even though it will be polished, it will never be exactly like it would have been. So Imam al-Ghazali says, every time you do a bad deed, you lose a part of the rational soul that you never get back. And what he wants to emphasize is that don't go one step forward and one step back. One step forward and one step back. A lot of people do that. They do something wrong, then they do tawbah. Okay, great. The tawbah has now removed that. And you're back at the beginning point. But then you're going to keep doing back and forth like this. This harms us very much. And you want to become really pure. And people who keep themselves pure, they have amazing hearts. They have really amazing hearts. So then he says, وَالْعَزْمُ أَلَّا يَرْجِعَ, okay? And to be determined never to do it again. Okay, again, we are human beings, we are weak, so we repent from certain things that we really, really repent from sincerely, and then in a month we find ourselves doing it again, right? So what do? You repent again. You immediately stop, and you determine, I'm not going to do this again, right? And you go ahead. Then he says, verse number 14, وَرَدُّ ظُلْمٍ مُمْكِنٍ وَالنَّدَمُ وَبِاجْتِنَابِ الْإِثْمِ يُمْحَى اللَّمَمُ. Very beautiful. Okay, and 3, to return what has been wrongfully taken. You know, that's not really a good word. Destroyed, we could say as well. Utilized, maybe, if possible. He says to return any oppression, meaning anything that you've done oppression in, if it's possible. And he means by that, you know, sometimes it's not possible. You know, for example, it may be that you did injustice to someone by saying something about them that you shouldn't have said. So it would be good if you could tell them you did it and ask their forgiveness, but sometimes we can't do that. Because sometimes if we tell the people that I called you such and such, then that will be a much greater calamity than the fact that we did it, right? And sometimes also we're not able to redress the things that we've done wrong, but usually we can. And if, for example, we've robbed money or we've embezzled money or whatever, you either give it back to the person, or if you can't do that because maybe they've died or whatever, then you have to give it in charity. But you know, there's no free meal. It's not like, well, you know, I robbed all this money, but I've done tawba now. Okay, give the money back. Oh, wait. You know, I wasn't thinking about that. No, you have to think about that. Okay, so to return whatever was wrongfully appropriated, maybe, or taken if possible. That's number 3. And 4, to regret the act. Okay, so really regret that you did it. You know, like, I'm really sorry that I did this. There's one of the great sheikhs of West Africa who's called Al-Bakka'i, means the big crier. He cries all the time. Al-Bakka'i was a big, powerful sheikh. There are 2 Bakka'is, the grandfather and the grandson. And they're big Qadiri sheikhs. But Al-Bakka'i, they say, why did he cry all the time? He always had a tear in his eye. And they say he grew up in a very pure environment. He was very upright. And all of his life, he never missed the first takbir in the mosque in the prayer. And then one day, he missed the first takbir. He didn't even miss the prayer. He maybe missed 1 rak'ah. And yet, you know, he felt the regret for that the rest of his life. Is that because he went too far, he overdid it? Was he a perfectionist? No. It's because, again, given the purity of his heart, he knew the right of Allah. And in doing the first takbir, he wasn't seeking a reward. He was seeking to fulfill the right of Allah. And so it's like, I never will be able to fulfill this right. And so this shows that his heart is really alive. That's why he's held in really high esteem. He's one of the great awliya. In fact, he was buried in a valley, and a long time after he died, generations after he died, a flash flood came and it revealed his grave. And they found him intact. This happens a lot in our history, right? Imam Malik tells us in the Muwatta that over about 100 years after the Battle of Uhud, the decision was made to get all the bodies of the Shuhada and put them in the big grave that they're in today. because they were buried in different places, and a lot of them were buried in ravines. They didn't have time to dig the graves. And then they would be exposed if there was a big rain. So in digging the bodies up and reburying the bodies, they found the body of a father and son who were both killed at Uhud. And they were embracing each other. They were hugging each other. And Imam Malik says in the Muwatta, and the Muwatta is an extremely authentic book, he says in it that nothing had changed except one of them, a little of his ear had deteriorated. That was all. Everything else was just like it was. And they tried to take the father and son apart so they could bury them separately, and every time they would take them apart, they would come back and hug each other again. So they'd try to do it, but they would come back and hug each other again, so they buried them that way. So, you know, we have lots of examples of that in our history. But when Sheikh Baka'i was dug up, they found out that he was still crying. He still had the tear that was coming down his cheek.